Today is all about the Selmer Supreme in its most exotic finishes. I've literally never had this opportunity to have so much expense in terms of saxophones sitting on my knees here. I have a gold-plated Supreme out on my right, a Solid Silver Supreme on my left, and behind me we've just got the regular lacquer model. Now, it's usually a year's wait for such exotic saxophones, so to me to have both of these in our store at the same time just seemed like a great opportunity to present both instruments in a video for you and do a back-to-back comparison. But at the same time, there may be many of you watching this video thinking this is completely out of my price range. I just cannot afford these instruments, even though I'm interested in what you're presenting to me and the outcome. So perhaps for you guys, it might be more relevant to consider a regular Supreme and see how that compares to those two instruments. So I'm going to throw all three in the mix and see how they all come out together. Okay, first of all, let's just look at the three instruments in question so we can visually tell them apart. We've got the gold-plated one here, and the gold-plated versus the gold lacquer in the background there, they do look fairly similar on first glance. But when you actually get into it more, you realise that there's a more sort of mirror-like sheen to the gold plate. Almost sort of looks more expensive, and it feels very expensive in my hands as well. We'll show you some shots outside of these three finishes where we've got the natural sunlight on the instruments, because often you can see different reflections and colours when you have it in different forms of light, particularly sunlight. Moving on to the solid silver instrument. We had a bit of a shock when this one turned up at our doors a few days ago, because initially when I looked at this instrument I thought there's some mistake. This is a gold finish instrument, but it is in fact solid silver, and it has over the top of it a medium gold lacquer, is what we've been told by Selmer. My interpretation would be that it's a thinnish lacquer to perhaps protect the solid silver from perhaps tarnishing, because Selmer always take the acoustic aspect as the priority in terms of their instruments. I must say I was surprised to see it looking like this, because in the past we've had Solid Silver Series 3 Selmers, and they have had the standard look that you'd expect from a solid silver instrument, and this one doesn't. It has this very obvious gold wash on it. But on saying that, when you rotate the instrument in certain lights, you can see the obvious element of the sterling silver coming through. So again, it's all about finding the right light source to bring out those qualities in the material. And then with the gold lacquer model, we've seen it before, and it's, as I say, similar to the gold plate, but it just doesn't quite have that same sheen. It's got more of a sort of dullness, if you like, a slightly darker look to the finish. Now onto the playing. So to construct a video that's hopefully useful for you, the way I've decided to do this is to play three quieter playing clips on all three instruments, followed by three more sort of full-bodied and full-force playing clips, because it's incredible how changing the velocity of the air through the instrument can bring out different colours in the saxophone, as we all know. So it's important to be a little bit boring and scientific, but hopefully we'll actually get to the answer, to the sort of crux of the matter, by doing it this way. So let's kick off with three quiet excerpts on all of the saxophones. Now, the first thing that surprised me was actually how different they felt and sounded to me. I really did expect them to be all much more similar, but it was quite surprising the different nuances that they all had. They all had their own character and difference. You can tell that in general they're all from the same family. It's got that same kind of core sound. But beyond that, there was a separate character with all three of them. With the gold-plated one, I felt there was more of a natural clarity and focus. And with the solid silver one, to me, it felt like the sound had just more breadth and a richness in there, a lot of kind of color in the middle area of the sort of frequency graph, if you like, the EQ graph. On the lacquer one, it felt to me like the tone was just a little airier, perhaps slightly darker, but there was a certain, as I say, airy quality about the tone when playing quietly. Interesting again how they just all felt different to me. I don't know how it comes across to you. We always have to point out that the experience playing here in the room and the experience for the player, the resistance that you feel is somewhat different to what's perceived at the other end when you are viewing. But that's my experience with the quiet playing clips. So it's interesting what happened there. When you really push the air through it, for me, the gold-plated model takes on this real extra crispness and clarity in the sound that we did hear at the quiet end, but it's very defined when we put a lot of air through it, and it seriously projects as well. There's so much volume there on hand with the gold-plated model. On the sterling silver model, it's the same thing in terms of the projection. It really does pack a punch. But the way it differs for me is that it retains this extra richness and colour in the sound that we got at the quiet end. And the volume and projection is equally there as it is with the gold-plated, but it's just not quite so focused as the gold-plated model is, so it's just more breadth in the sound. When we move on to the standard lacquer model, it feels just more of a sort of normal sound, if you like. It's almost taking those tonal qualities that we had in the quiet playing and just ramping up the volume. We don't quite get that sort of extra crispness and clarity on the top of the sound like we do with the gold-plated model. And it doesn't quite have that same richness that we're getting with the sterling silver model. And it doesn't perhaps quite peak to the same level of projection, but of course it still projects a great deal as we would expect. In conclusion, I would say that the results actually did surprise me somewhat, because I rather expected the gold lacquer version and the gold-plated version to actually be very, very similar. And I thought I'd be talking about the fact that, isn't it incredible how you have to pay thousands and thousands of extra pounds or dollars to get the gold-plated version? But there were more differences in there than I expected between those two particular models. So let's just take those two to start with. We are dealing with exactly the same instrument. It's got a brass structure, and the only difference in terms of the saxophone is having this gold plate, albeit a very thick gold plate, on the outside of the saxophone. This is the gold plated one right here. But we did get those differences. So clearly the gold plate is having an effect on the sound and the resistance and the feel. But of course, we also have to remember that this is a different saxophone from the gold lacquer one, and saxophones can vary from model to model. There can also be differences in setup, and that can change the way things feel and sometimes sound as well. So that has to be taken into the equation. Going to the sterling silver saxophone, of course, the entire base metal is different. The whole thing is made from sterling silver all the way through. So the air column is bouncing initially off that sterling silver on the inside, and the whole thing is vibrating. So you would expect that difference. And we were hearing those differences as I have described. But it's just interesting that we are getting such differences between the gold lacquer version and the gold plated version. I'd be interested to hear and see your comments on the differences, because to me it feels very obvious in the room. We always say this, but it may not sound so different to you guys sitting at home watching this video back. But overall, I mean, we cannot deny the fact that these are incredible instruments, whether it's the lacquer one that you would be considering, or if you did have that extra cash, and it's a lot of extra cash, to move up to the gold-plated and sterling silver instruments. But it is great to hear that you do get these changes in the acoustics and response at all dynamic levels. There are differences there on hand, and it's not just about having an elite saxophone, perhaps a status symbol to have one of these instruments. Sure, it could be a status symbol, but at the same time, there is a serious acoustical reason and justification for going for one of these incredibly expensive and beautiful saxophones.